Imagine walking into a voting booth. Before you is the usual ballot, but instead of party slogans, tax cut promises, or radical reforms, you see only 12 symbols. No names, no faces, only birth dates and the constellations under which each candidate entered the world. The choice that determines the fate of the country for the next 4 years is no longer based on a platform of action, but on the alignment of the planets at the moment of a future leader's first cry. It sounds like an absurdity or a dystopian screenplay, but what if this were our reality? We're used to viewing astrology as mere entertainment, but for our ancestors, the sky was the first and primary guidebook. When the early civilizations of Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt looked upward, they weren't just looking for beauty, they were looking for patterns. People noticed that natural cycles synchronized strangely with the movement of the stars, and over time, this connection was mapped onto human destiny. The 12 signs of the Zodiac became an attempt to structure the chaos of human nature, assigning specific archetypes to different groups. The belief that a birth date defines character, ambition, and leadership potential has endured for millennia, rooting itself in the very foundation of human culture. History shows that monarchs and dictators often trusted the stars more than their own ministers. Roman emperors kept personal stargazers at court, and Queen Elizabeth I refused to set a coronation date until her loyal advisor, John Dee, calculated the most auspicious moment using a celestial map. Modern history even offers stunning examples. It's said that Ronald Reagan's schedule and critical state decisions were often adjusted by an astrologer following the attempt on his life. When the stakes are incredibly high, leaders look to the universe for clues, trying to find logic where political uncertainty reigns. Now, let's imagine that astrology stopped being a secret advisor and became the primary election criterion. In this parallel world, campaign debates look very different. Instead of arguing over budget deficits, candidates defend their natal charts. How can you trust the country to a Gemini whose volatility will destroy the stability of our currency, shouts a Capricorn opponent. Voters don't discuss corruption scandals. They discuss Mercury in retrograde, which might interfere with the signing of international treaties. Only those with an ascendant in strong signs are allowed to run, and political analysts transform into professional astrologers, forecasting the nation's future by the movement of Pluto. This is a world where personal charisma and professional experience weigh less than which house Saturn occupied on the day you were born. If this experiment became a reality, we would see completely different leadership styles. Aries would be a wartime president or a leader for an era of great crisis. Their unstoppable energy and readiness to charge forward are perfect for radical reforms, though they risk international conflict through sheer impulsivity. Taurus would usher in an era of cozy conservatism and economic stability. Under such a leader, gold reserves grow, but innovation might stall due to a fear of change. Gemini would turn foreign policy into a masterclass in performance. These are communication experts capable of negotiating with anyone, though their platform might change 3 times a week. Leo is the symbol president, a charismatic leader who makes the nation proud, even if real-world affairs aren't going perfectly. Scorpio would run the country like a grandmaster. This is strategic policy behind closed doors. When we move from theory to facts, it becomes clear. The global political arena is a literal zodiac ring, where every sign plays its part. But is there a constellation that produces presidents more often than others? If we analyze the leaders of the world's most influential democracies, Scorpio and Aquarius confidently hold the lead. Scorpios, the masters of survival. Joe Biden, Theodore Roosevelt, Charles de Gaulle. A Scorpio in power is always about endurance. These are leaders who thrive in moments of peak tension. Their reigns usually coincide with turning points when a nation needs iron will to weather the storm. Aquarians, the architects of the future. Abraham Lincoln, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan. This is the sign of reformers and visionaries. Interestingly, it is Aquarians who most often author a new deal for their countries. They look decades ahead, breaking outdated systems and proposing ideas that seem radical at first, but later become the bedrock of the state. However, if we look at global statistics, including European prime ministers and G7 leaders, we see a dominance of Sagittarius. Sagittarius, energy and ideology. Winston Churchill and Emmanuel Macron. A Sagittarius brings ideological drive and scale to politics. These are leaders of expansion. Churchill, with his inexhaustible optimism, his cigar, and his will to win, is the quintessential fire sign Sagittarius, capable of igniting an entire nation with faith in triumph, even with the enemy at the gates. We also can't overlook Gemini. Donald Trump and Boris Johnson are classic representatives. Their style is built on charisma, a brilliant command of language, and the ability to turn politics into a vivid show. They work an audience masterfully, pivoting their rhetoric instantly, depending on which way the wind of public opinion is blowing. And what about Leos? Barack Obama and Bill Clinton embody the solar energy of this sign. They are symbol presidents whose primary weapon is personal charm. They know how to inspire and project an image of success and stability, making every citizen feel like part of a grand winning story. Even if you're a skeptic, it's hard to deny that each of these leaders possesses traits that resonate strangely with their celestial map. Some lead with intellectual precision, like Virgos, while others lead with strategic patience, like Capricorns. So, who is the ideal president? Leo gives us charisma. Capricorn gives us unwavering strategy. Libra brings peace through diplomacy. And Scorpio offers absolute control. Yet history teaches us that the perfect sign doesn't exist. Every strength has its flip side. Decisiveness can become dictatorship, and a drive for compromise can become weakness. Perhaps the best leader is the one capable of stepping beyond their horoscope to cultivate qualities they weren't born with. If such a system actually existed, the world might become more predictable. Perhaps humanity would stop seeing leadership as a battle of ideas and start seeing it as a great cosmic clock, where it's simply time for each sign to play its part. Ultimately, we can search for answers indefinitely in the arrangement of constellations or at the bottom of a coffee cup. Maybe the stars really can suggest something, hinting at a temperament or a natural leaning, but the future of nations, the fate of millions, and the course of history are still made here on Earth. They are made by people, by their will, their mistakes, and their conscious decisions. The stars only shine. The path is ours to choose. Do you believe a leader's character depends on their birth date? Let me know in the comments. Which zodiac sign would you want to see in your country's next president? What would have happened to humanity if the fate of empires had been decided by a randomly drawn tarot card? This isn't an attempt to rewrite history, but imagine if it had worked that way. Classic tarot cards appeared in Italy around the 15th century. The oldest known deck is the Visconti Sforza, dated to about 1428. It was commissioned by influential Milanese families as a prestigious courtly game. Ancient civilizations didn't know tarot, but they understood the need for signs. In Babylon, eclipses were interpreted as warnings of a ruler's downfall. In ancient Rome, before battles, they observed how sacred chickens ate. If the birds refused, the attack was postponed. In Greece, the Oracle of Delphi could influence decisions about war or alliances. In China, the emperor consulted the Book of Changes, casting hexagrams before major reforms. Among the Aztecs, priests interpreted calendar signs before sacrifices. Humans have always looked for a sign before making big decisions, because when thousands of lives are at stake, rational thinking alone doesn't feel like enough. We also want the reassurance that we're not making a mistake. But what if the tarot system, with its archetypes, the emperor, the high priestess, the wheel of fortune, death, had emerged much earlier and become part of political culture? For example, King Solomon entered history as a symbol of wisdom. 2 women once came to him with a living child, each claiming to be the mother. Solomon ordered the baby to be cut in half. One woman agreed, the other begged to save the child. Through their reactions and his deep understanding of human psychology, he identified the true mother. But what if, before making his decision, he had drawn the Fool? The Fool symbolizes a new path, freedom, openness to possibility, risk, and trust in the unknown. Taken literally, Solomon might have said, a new path means freedom from attachment. He could have suggested that both women give up the child as part of letting go of the old story, entrusting the baby to the temple and starting new lives. Or he might have declared that the child would choose her mother when she grew up. History might have remembered him not as Solomon the Wise, but as Solomon the Fool. Or take Alexander the Great. In 334 BCE, he crossed the Hellespont and launched his campaign against the Persian Empire, a small army against a vast state. He won at Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela, creating an empire stretching from Greece to India. But imagine that before crossing, he drew the Hermit, a card of solitude, inner search, and spiritual growth. It suggests withdrawal from the world and focus on inner truth. If taken literally, history might not have gained a conqueror, but a wandering philosopher who laid down his sword and headed for the mountains to discover himself. Instead of an empire, perhaps a school of meditative strategy would have emerged. The world would have lost a general and gained an ascetic. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, breaking the law and starting a civil war. His "the die is cast" became a symbol of the point of no return. But imagine that instead of casting lots, he drew the Hanged Man, a card of pause, reevaluation, and shifting perspective. He might have stopped, sat on the riverbank, and said, maybe the problem isn't the Senate, maybe it's my ego. He could have gone on a strategic retreat, worked through limiting beliefs, released the need to control everything, and returned to Rome not as a dictator, but as a transformational leadership coach. But as we know, history chose a different storyline. Even in hunter tribes before a hunt, a shaman might have laid out cards. The chariot, we attack at dawn while the wind favors us. But then the magician appears, a card of creativity and potential. So the entire tribe paints affirmations instead of searching for food. Of course, all of this sounds absurd, but why do people, today and thousands of years ago, turn to signs of fate? Neurobiology offers an answer. The brain craves certainty. In states of uncertainty, the amygdala, the fear center, activates, cortisol levels rise, and our ability to perform complex analysis declines. Physiologically, we're uncomfortable living in "I don't know." The brain perceives uncertainty almost as a threat. A symbolic system reduces that tension. It creates a framework in which chaos feels structured. When a sign appears, an explanation appears, and a sense of control, even an illusory one, lowers anxiety and allows us to act more confidently. Cognitive psychology explains this through projection and the Barnum effect. When general statements feel deeply personal, we don't receive answers from the outside. We recognize in the symbol a position we've already almost chosen. The card becomes a mirror, not the source of the decision. In ancient societies, this also had a political function. A decision supported by a sign was easier for the community to accept. Responsibility dissolved. It wasn't the ruler who decided. That's just how it fell. We turn to signs because they help us endure uncertainty. They transform a personal choice into the right choice. Because the scariest thing for a human being isn't making a mistake. The scariest thing is taking full responsibility for it. And maybe our true empire and real maturity begins not when the right card appears, but when we admit this is our choice, and its consequences are ours too. Why do temples use candles instead of neon sticks? We've long grown used to fireless light. But what if every temple had modern LED lamps and people lit a neon stick instead of a candle? It would be convenient, smoke-free, and without wax dripping on the floor. Yet, tradition stubbornly clings to live flames. Let's start from the beginning. The candle was born from open fire. The first lamps were stone or clay bowls filled with animal fat, with moss or plant fiber wicks. Such lamps, found in caves in France and Spain, are over 30,000 years old. They burned slowly, gave steady light, and allowed people to work deep inside caves where they created rock paintings. Interestingly, some cave artists placed lamps to highlight the wall reliefs, creating a sense of three-dimensional imagery, arguably the world's first attempt at light design. Gradually, forms closer to the modern candle emerged. In ancient Egypt, beeswax was used. It was harvested from hives, purified, and molded around a wick. Wax burned evenly, emitted warm light, and produced almost no smoke. These candles were used in temples and religious rituals. Wax also had value for embalming and making seals, and when burned, released an aroma considered sacred, enhancing meditation. The Egyptians believed the scent helped spirits find their way into the temple. In the Roman Empire, candle making became more widespread. Tallow candles, cheaper and more accessible, became common. They were made by repeatedly dipping a wick into melted fat, layer by layer, forming the candle's body. These candles lit homes, streets, and military camps. In medieval Europe, candles became an important part of the economy. Candle-making guilds controlled production and sales. Beeswax candles remained expensive and were a sign of wealth, ordered by cathedrals, monasteries, and wealthy families. Tallow candles were used in everyday life, though they smoked more and smelled stronger. In 14th to 15th century cities, authorities regulated the fat content in candles because it affected the smoke during long church services. In London, there was even a special smoke warden for large churches. In temples, candle requirements were special. Large cathedrals could burn hundreds of candles at once, and mirrored or silver holders dispersed light across domes and altars. In some abbeys, candles were placed in rotating candelabras to illuminate different parts of the church, or hung above stairways, symbolizing the ascent of light. Candles also became tools for measuring time. Monks marked them with divisions. Some designs embedded metal balls or pins in the wax. When melted to a certain level, they would fall and make a sound. This marked the end of a prayer session or a night watch. In some abbeys, candles even synchronized prayers across rooms, creating a temporal rhythm in the dark. A person approaches the candle holder, lights a candle, and places it among others. The flame passes from one candle to the next. This creates a sense of continuity. Each new flame continues the previous one. There's pause, attention, and a physical action that aids focus. In some monasteries, lighting candles on stairs or floors symbolized lifting light toward the domes, illuminating the entire space and creating a sense of wholeness. Now consider another option. Neon light. We've stepped into modernity. Neon was discovered in the late 19th century. By 1910, the first neon lamps appeared in Paris, quickly spreading to New York and London. Signs lit up the streets at night, giving rise to the night glow of megacities, transforming how people saw urban space. Early neon ads promoted watches and perfumes, and these lamps could run for weeks without replacement. In the 1920s US, neon patrols even ensured lamps on streets were functioning properly. Modern technology has taken this further. Today, massive light shows take place in temples and cathedrals. In France and Germany, historic buildings serve as canvases for video projections. Light moves along the architecture, creating depth and transforming space. A candle flame behaves differently. It constantly shifts, flickers, and reacts to the slightest air movement. This microdynamics affects the brain. Watching fire activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowering stress, slowing heart rate, and deepening breathing. Observing a live flame stimulates alpha waves linked to calmness, focus, and inner balance. This effect has deep roots. Humans have lived alongside fire for thousands of years. It provided light, warmth, and safety. Our brains are wired to recognize this signal. Even today, a flame feels stable and reliable. Living, breathing light creates a psychological connection to space and ritual which no technology, however bright, can replicate. A candle connects history, action, and physiological effect. It helps us pause, feel the moment, and focus inward. The world changes, but this gesture remains. A flame passed from hand to hand continues a millennia-old tradition, creating quiet within and light all around.